Marcus stood behind the bar, wiping down the counter as he always did. The small neighborhood bar had been his sanctuary for years. The wood was worn, the lights dim, but it was his place. People came for the beer, but they stayed for Marcus. He was known for being calm, friendly, and always willing to lend an ear to anyone who needed it. It was just another evening until the door swung open. In walked Tyrell, a man with a past. His dark skin and muscular build stood out, but it wasn't his appearance that made people uneasy. It was his history. Tyrell had spent years in prison, and everyone in the neighborhood knew it. Some still whispered about him when he passed by, even though he was trying to rebuild his life. Tyrell took a seat at the end of the bar, eyes down, trying to blend in. But it was clear from the way the others looked at him that they weren't ready to accept him. Marcus noticed the way people stiffened when Tyrell walked in, but he didn't care. To Marcus, everyone deserved a second chance. Marcus didn't know much about Tyrell's past, but he knew that if the man was here, it was because he was trying. That was enough for him. The bartender smiled and slid a glass of water in front of Tyrell. On the house. "I hope you're doing well, Tyrell," he said, keeping his tone friendly but neutral. Before Tyrell could respond, the door opened again. This time, a police officer walked in. His uniform was freshly pressed, and his boots clicked loudly on the floor as he made his way to the counter. Tyrell froze. Marcus knew the officer. Officer Daniels wasn't a stranger to the bar, but there was something different about him tonight. He wasn't smiling, his eyes weren't warm, and he didn't greet anyone. Instead, his gaze landed squarely on Tyrell. Marcus could feel the tension rise. The officer stood at the counter, his posture rigid. "What's your name, man?" Officer Daniels asked, his voice low but sharp. Tyrell glanced up, his eyes briefly meeting Marcus's, but he didn't speak. The officer's eyes narrowed. "Don't ignore me. I'm talking to you." Tyrell's hands gripped the edge of the counter. His face tensed, but he stayed quiet. He knew the officer was just looking for a reason to start trouble. Marcus watched the scene unfold in front of him. The bar, usually filled with chatter and laughter, was suddenly silent. The air was thick with unspoken words. Marcus stepped forward, his voice firm but calm. "Officer, that's enough. He's just here for a drink, like everyone else." Officer Daniels didn't take his eyes off Tyrell. "Is that so? This man's a criminal, a convict. You really want someone like him sitting at your bar?" he asked, his tone growing colder. Marcus felt his heart beat faster. He was used to handling drunk customers, but this was different. He wasn't about to let anyone walk into his place and treat a man with respect like that. "Tyrell has served his time," Marcus said, his voice louder now, strong enough for the room to hear. "He's just trying to live his life. Let him." A few people in the bar watched nervously, glancing between the officer and Marcus. They didn't want to get involved, but they were listening. Marcus wasn't backing down. The officer's expression darkened. He stepped forward, leaning in, eyes filled with something like anger. "You better watch how you speak to me, Marcus. This guy," he jabbed a finger at Tyrell, "he's trouble. And I won't let him ruin your bar, your reputation." Marcus could feel the heat rising in his chest. He wasn't scared of Officer Daniels, not at all. But he knew the officer wasn't the only threat in the room. He was outnumbered. One wrong move, and this could get ugly. But he stood his ground. "If you want him gone," Marcus said, his voice steady, "you'll have to arrest him. You can't just throw him out based on what's happened in his past. That's not how we do things here." The officer's jaw tightened. "You think you can stop me? I can make your life hell, Marcus. You think people will keep coming here once they know you're protecting someone like him?" Marcus met the officer's gaze, not flinching. "I'm not protecting anyone, Daniels. I'm giving him a chance, just like you've had yours." The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the fridge in the corner. The officer took a step back, eyes flashing with frustration. For a moment, it seemed like the tension would snap, like the officer would pull out his handcuffs or draw his weapon. But then something happened that Marcus didn't expect. The officer hesitated. He took a long breath, then slowly stepped back. His eyes darted from Marcus to Tyrell, and for the first time, there was a flicker of doubt in them. "Fine," he muttered, glaring at Marcus. But this isn't over. Without another word, Officer Daniels turned and walked out the door, leaving a stunned silence behind him. The door closed behind him with a soft thud. The room remained still for a few seconds before a few people slowly started talking again, their voices quieter than before. Marcus turned to Tyrell, his voice soft but firm. "You're safe here, man. Don't worry about him." Tyrell let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his shoulders relaxing. I didn't think he'd stand up for me, Marcus. I thought for sure he'd arrest me." Marcus gave a small smile. "Not today, Tyrell. Not today." But as he turned back to the bar, Marcus felt an uneasy sense of foreboding. This wasn't over. Something bigger was coming. And Marcus had no idea what it would mean for him, his bar, or Tyrell. But one thing was clear, he was ready to fight for it. The night after the confrontation with Officer Daniels, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He went through the usual motions of running the bar, cleaning glasses, pouring drinks, and chatting with the regulars, but his mind kept drifting back to the officer's words. "You think you can stop me?" Those words echoed in Marcus's head, like a warning he couldn't ignore. It was late, and the last of the regulars had left. Marcus locked the doors and turned off the lights, preparing to close for the night. But just as he was about to walk into the back office, there was a knock at the door. Marcus froze. Who could be coming by this late? He opened the door cautiously, his hand resting on the handle. When he saw who it was, his heart skipped a beat. It was Detective Harper, an old friend of Marcus's. Harper had always been the one Marcus turned to when trouble found its way into his life. He was a man who believed in doing the right thing, even if it meant going against the system. Harper had always kept an eye on Marcus's bar, though it was clear the officer wasn't just here for a friendly visit. "Marcus, we need to talk," Harper said, his voice low, eyes darting around as if someone might be listening. Marcus stepped aside, letting Harper in. "What's going on?" he asked, sensing the urgency in Harper's tone. Harper's face was serious. He glanced over his shoulder as he closed the door behind him. "It's about Tyrell. Those bikers. They're coming for him." The mention of the bikers made Marcus's stomach tighten. He had already seen their motorcycles parked outside his bar a few times, but he hadn't realized just how dangerous they were. "Bikers? What do you mean, they're coming for him?" Marcus asked, his voice tense. Harper sighed deeply, rubbing his hand over his face. "They're not just any bikers, Marcus. They're connected to some dangerous people who are deep in illegal activities. The police can't do much about them, but I've been tracking them. They've been looking for Tyrell ever since he showed up at your bar." Marcus's mind raced. Tyrell hadn't done anything wrong. He was just trying to turn his life around. Why would the bikers be after him? Why Tyrell? What did he do? Marcus asked, shaking his head. He didn't understand. Harper looked Marcus in the eye. "It's not what he did. It's who he is. You see, Tyrell used to be involved with these people, but he turned his back on them when he got out of prison. They don't take kindly to people walking away from them. They'll do anything to remind him that he can't escape his past." The air in the room felt heavy. Marcus was silent for a moment, letting the weight of Harper's words sink in. He thought about Tyrell, sitting in the bar earlier that night, sipping his drink quietly. Tyrell hadn't done anything wrong. He was just a man who wanted a fresh start. But now, Marcus knew the truth. Tyrell's past had come back to haunt him. "They've been watching, Marcus," Harper continued, "and they've already made a move. You won't see it coming, but they'll hit you where it hurts. They don't mess around." Marcus clenched his fists, a fire rising within him. He wasn't going to let anyone hurt Tyrell or his bar. This was his place, and no one, not even the bikers, was going to take it away from him. "How do we stop them?" Marcus asked, his voice determined. He was done being on the defensive. He wasn't about to let the bikers take control of his life. Harper shook his head, a worried look crossing his face. "I don't know if you can, Marcus. These people are dangerous. And the worst part is, they have connections. People in high places who can protect them. The police can't touch them." Marcus's mind was racing. He couldn't just sit back and watch Tyrell get hurt. He had to do something. I won't let them hurt him, or my bar, Marcus said firmly. If we have to go up against them, we will. Harper looked at Marcus for a long moment, his expression softening. I knew you were going to say that. I just hope you know what you're getting into. This isn't going to be easy. Before Marcus could respond, there was a loud engine noise outside, the unmistakable sound of motorcycles revving up. The hairs on the back of Marcus's neck stood up. Harper's eyes widened in recognition. That's them. They're here. The sound of the engines grew louder, and then there was a knock at the door. Marcus's heart pounded. He wasn't ready for this. But then again, when had he ever been ready for the kind of trouble that followed him? He looked at Harper, who nodded grimly. I'll be right behind you, Harper said, his hand resting on the gun at his side. Marcus took a deep breath and walked toward the door. He could feel the tension building. He was about to face something much bigger than he ever expected. The door creaked open, and the first face he saw was one he'd seen before. But this time, it was filled with intimidation. The door opened slowly, the sound of motorcycle engines roaring outside sending a chill down Marcus's spine. He didn't know how many bikers were out there, but he could feel the weight of their presence. Marcus stood tall, trying to hide the uncertainty gnawing at him. He'd faced tough situations before, but this felt different. He wasn't just standing up for his bar. Now, he was standing up for Tyrell's future, and his own. Outside, the headlights of multiple motorcycles shone bright through the small windows of the bar. The roar of the engines faded slightly as the bikes came to a halt. Marcus could see their shadows moving through the foggy glass. Tyrell stiffened, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a tense defensive posture. He hadn't expected this, but now that it was happening, he felt the weight of his past pressing down on him. I told you, Marcus, Harper whispered, his voice tight with concern. They don't play games. Marcus didn't answer. Instead, he reached under the counter, his fingers brushing against something familiar, his old baseball bat. He hadn't used it in years, but tonight, it was all he had. A loud knock echoed through the door. Open up, Marcus, a voice called out from the other side. It was gruff, with an edge of authority. We've got business with you. Marcus took a deep breath and exchanged a quick glance with Harper. The detective was ready, his hand still hovering over his holstered gun. But Marcus knew this wasn't the time for guns. Not yet. Stay calm, Tyrell, Marcus said, his voice low and steady, but his heart raced. I'll handle this. He walked slowly to the door, feeling every second stretch out like a lifetime. The sound of the motorcycles outside still rang in his ears, the vibrations from their engines shaking the building. As Marcus reached for the door handle, he felt a sense of dread settle over him. He wasn't scared, but he was anxious. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. With a final exhale, Marcus opened the door. The first thing he saw were the motorcycles parked in a row, their engines still idling. Then he looked up at the men standing in front of him. There were 4 of them, big guys, all dressed in black leather jackets with the same logo on their backs, a skull with crossed knives. Marcus knew the symbol well. These men were part of the Razorbacks, a notorious biker gang with a reputation for violence. The man in the front, the leader by the way he carried himself, stepped forward. He was tall, with a thick beard and a cold stare that seemed to pierce right through Marcus. Marcus, the man growled, his voice deep and threatening. I heard you've been causing trouble, defending the convict, huh? Marcus stood his ground. I don't want trouble. I'm just running a bar. You're not welcome here. The man laughed, a low guttural sound that echoed in the silent street. You think you can stop us? You've been protecting him, haven't you? He pointed at Tyrell, who was now standing by the counter, visibly tense. We don't take kindly to people who try to leave us, Marcus. And Tyrell's one of ours. He betrayed us, and now he has to pay. Marcus's heart sank. He knew the bikers wouldn't just let this go, but hearing them say it out loud made it feel real. He felt a fire build inside of him. He wasn't about to let them destroy Tyrell's second chance. Tyrell's not your property, Marcus said, his voice calm but forceful. He made his choice, and I'm not letting you intimidate him. The leader's face darkened, You're really going to defend him, huh? You don't know who you're messing with, Marcus. We don't just leave people alone when they step out of line. He stepped closer, towering over Marcus. You don't understand what you're getting yourself into. Marcus didn't flinch. He wasn't going to back down, not now. You can threaten me all you want, but you're not going to touch him. Not while I'm standing here. The leader paused for a moment, his eyes narrowing. For a second, Marcus thought the man was going to hit him. But instead, the leader nodded toward the other bikers. You've got guts, Marcus, the leader said with a sly smile. I'll give you that. But just know this, we don't take kindly to being embarrassed. We'll make sure you remember this night. Marcus's stomach tightened as the leader stepped back. We'll be watching, he added coldly. Then, without another word, he turned and motioned for his men to leave. The bikers started up their motorcycles, and the sound of their engines roared to life once more. As the motorcycles drove off, the vibration from the engines lingered in the air. The silence that followed felt heavy, as if the threat of what was to come hung over them all. Harper, who had been watching from the corner, finally stepped forward. That was just a warning, Marcus. They'll be back, and next time, they won't just be talking. Marcus didn't answer right away. He was still processing everything that had happened. He'd stood up to them, but that didn't mean they were done. Far from it. He knew the bikers would return, and when they did, it wouldn't just be words. Tyrell walked up to Marcus, his face a mixture of gratitude and fear. I didn't expect them to come here, Marcus. I didn't want any of this. Marcus placed a hand on Tyrell's shoulder. Don't worry about it. We'll face whatever comes together, but you need to be ready. They won't stop until they get what they want. The threat of the bikers loomed over them like a dark cloud. Marcus could feel it in his bones. This was only the beginning. And the worst was yet to come. The night was heavy with tension, the air thick with the promise of something dangerous. Marcus paced back and forth inside the bar, his mind racing. The bikers had left, but the feeling of impending danger lingered. He knew they would come back, and when they did, it wouldn't just be words. Tyrell sat in the corner, staring out the window into the darkness. He was quiet, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a look of fear and regret. It was clear to Marcus that Tyrell had hoped his past would stay behind him, but now, that past was crashing back into his life, threatening everything he had worked for. Marcus couldn't let that happen. He had made a promise to protect Tyrell, and he wasn't about to break it. But even as he tried to reassure himself, he knew the bikers wouldn't back down. They would come back with more force, more violence, and Marcus would have to be ready. Just then, the sharp sound of tires screeching broke the silence. Marcus froze. He quickly moved to the window and peered out into the street. A black van was parked just outside. He didn't recognize it, but the motorcycle engines in the distance were unmistakable. The bikers were returning. Get ready, Marcus whispered to Tyrell. This is it. Tyrell stood up slowly, his face pale. I didn't want this to happen, Marcus. I didn't want to drag you into this. Marcus placed a hand on Tyrell's shoulder, his voice steady. You didn't drag me anywhere. I'm choosing to be here. We'll get through this together. There was a knock at the door, this time louder, more forceful. Marcus's heart raced, but he didn't hesitate. He walked toward the door, his hand gripping the baseball bat tighter. As he opened the door, the leader of the Razorbacks stood there, flanked by two of his men. The man's expression was colder than before, and his eyes glinted with malice. Marcus, he growled, it's time we settle this. We've been more than patient, but you just don't seem to understand the message. Behind him, the sound of more motorcycles revving up echoed down the street. Marcus glanced over his shoulder at Tyrell, who stood frozen, his eyes wide with fear. Marcus knew this was the moment. There was no more running, no more waiting for the police. This was going to be mano a mano. I don't want trouble, Marcus said, his voice calm but unwavering. But if you think you can threaten me and my bar, you've got another thing coming. The leader chuckled darkly. You think you're some kind of hero. You're just a bartender, Marcus. You can't save him. You can't save yourself. He signaled to his men, and one of them stepped forward, a large crowbar in his hand. The other biker was holding a chainsaw, a weapon so over the top that it made Marcus's blood run cold. "This is your last chance," the leader sneered. "Step aside and let us take him, or we'll take everything." Marcus tightened his grip on the bat. The air felt thick with tension. He knew this wasn't just about Tyrell anymore. This was about respect, about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. Without warning, the first biker swung the crowbar toward Marcus. He barely dodged in time, the metal missing his side by inches. "Stay back," Marcus shouted, raising the bat defensively. He swung it at the biker's legs, knocking him back with a solid hit. The biker stumbled, but he didn't fall. He was ready to swing again. The chainsaw roared to life, and Marcus spun around just in time to see the second biker charging at him. The sound of the chainsaw cutting through the air was deafening, and Marcus barely ducked in time, the blade grazing his shoulder. The pain shot through him like a jolt of electricity, but he pushed it aside. He was in a fight for his life now. "Tyrell, get to the back," Marcus shouted, but Tyrell stood frozen, too scared to move. He watched the scene unfold in front of him, the terror on his face evident. "Go," Marcus ordered again, his voice booming. Finally, Tyrell turned and ran toward the back of the bar, his feet pounding against the floor as he disappeared into the shadows. Marcus focused back on the bikers. The one with the crowbar was recovering. His eyes locked on Marcus with burning anger. The chainsaw biker, though, was more cautious, circling Marcus as if looking for an opening. Marcus was growing tired. His shoulder throbbed, and his hands were shaking from the adrenaline. But he couldn't stop now. He couldn't show weakness. With a quick glance, Marcus spotted a broken bottle on the floor nearby. Without thinking, he grabbed it and hurled it toward the biker with the crowbar. The bottle shattered, catching the man off guard and giving Marcus a split second to close the distance between them. He swung the bat hard, knocking the crowbar out of the biker's hands. The biker fell back, but Marcus wasn't done yet. He stepped forward, driving the bat into the man's stomach, sending him sprawling to the ground. Now it was just the chainsaw biker left. The man snarled and revved the chainsaw louder, coming at Marcus with terrifying speed. But Marcus had already seen this move before. He ducked low, grabbing the man's legs and tripping him. The chainsaw flew out of the biker's hands, and Marcus grabbed it, turning it off and tossing it aside. "Stay down," Marcus growled, standing over the defeated man. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a loud engine noise sounded from outside, followed by the sound of dozens of motorcycles pulling up. More bikers were coming. Marcus knew this wasn't over. He had only bought them a little time. But now, he was ready, and he wasn't backing down. To be continued in Part 5. The final battle. The roar of the engines outside was deafening, filling the streets with a terrifying sense of foreboding. More motorcycles had arrived, dozens of them. Marcus could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him like a storm about to break. He had already fought 2 of the bikers, but he knew that wasn't enough. They weren't going to stop until they had Tyrell, or until Marcus was out of the way. He wasn't sure how much longer he could hold them off, but one thing was certain. He wasn't going down without a fight. Inside the bar, the air was thick with tension. The shattered glass from the broken bottle littered the floor, and the smell of gasoline from the chainsaw still lingered in the air. Marcus's hands shook slightly as he gripped the bat, his eyes darting toward the back door. Where Tyrell had fled, he had to protect him. "Marcus," Harper's voice broke through the silence. The detective had been watching from the back of the room, his face a mask of worry. "We need to get out of here. There's too many of them." Marcus shook his head. "We're not running. Not now. They want Tyrell, and they want to send a message. I'm not going to let them do that." Tyrell appeared in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. "Marcus, they're not gonna stop. I told you, I don't want this fight. I don't want to drag you into it." Marcus turned to him, his voice calm but firm. "You didn't drag me here, Tyrell. I chose to stand by you, and I'm not leaving you now." The sound of motorcycles revving up once again interrupted the conversation. The bikers were on the move. It was happening. The final confrontation was about to begin. Marcus stepped toward the door, his bat gripped tightly in his hands. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he walked out into the street, ready for whatever was coming. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he was prepared to face it head-on. Standing in front of him were the Razorbacks, and behind them, the rest of the bikers. The leader stood at the forefront, his cold eyes fixed on Marcus. "Marcus," the leader called out, his voice loud and mocking. "I told you this would happen. You think you can protect him? You think you can stand in our way?" Marcus didn't flinch. He stood tall, his eyes locked on the leader. "I'm not afraid of you," he said, his voice steady. "I'm not afraid of any of you." The leader sneered. "You should be. We don't play by the rules. And if you want to keep that bar of yours in one piece, you'll hand him over." Tyrell stepped forward, his expression resolute. "No," he said quietly. "I won't go back to that life. I won't let you control me anymore." The leader laughed, his laughter echoing in the quiet night. "You don't have a choice, Tyrell. You belong to us. You always will." But Marcus wasn't having it. He stepped between Tyrell and the bikers, his bat raised and ready. "I said no," Marcus repeated, his voice low but full of authority. "You're not taking him. You're not taking anyone." For a moment, everything was still. The bikers eyed each other, as if wondering whether this was really going to escalate into an all-out fight. The tension was unbearable, like a fuse waiting to burn to the end. Then, in a sudden move, the leader nodded, and the bikers charged. The sound of engines revving filled the air once again as the bikers closed in on Marcus and Tyrell. But Marcus was ready. He swung the bat with all his strength, knocking one of the bikers off his bike and sending him crashing to the ground. A second biker lunged at him, swinging a crowbar wildly. Marcus dodged, using the bat to deflect the blow, and with one swift strike, he knocked the man back. The biker stumbled, but didn't fall. But the leader was still there, and this time he wasn't playing around. He pulled out a large knife, its blade gleaming in the moonlight. He lunged at Marcus, aiming for his stomach. Marcus barely had time to react. He sidestepped, but the blade scraped against his side, leaving a gash. The pain was intense, but Marcus gritted his teeth and pushed through it. He swung the bat again, hitting the leader in the chest and sending him sprawling to the ground. Tyrell, who had been frozen in fear, finally found his courage. He grabbed a broken piece of wood from the wrecked bar and stepped into the fray. With a swift strike, he knocked one of the bikers off his feet, and the others paused for a moment. "This is our fight," Tyrell shouted, his voice fierce. "And we're not backing down." The bikers hesitated, but then they regrouped, preparing for another assault. They were angry now, their pride wounded, but Marcus and Tyrell stood together, ready to face whatever came next. Suddenly, the sound of sirens rang out in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. The bikers froze. The police were finally on their way. https://www.capcut.com/tools/text-to-speech. The police cruisers finally pulled up, their flashing lights casting a blue glow over the street. The sound of sirens faded, leaving behind an eerie silence as the bikers disappeared into the night, their engines roaring into the distance. Marcus and Tyrell stood together in the middle of the street, bruised but unbroken, their faces marked by the aftermath of the battle. "Marcus," Tyrell said softly, his voice full of disbelief. "I can't believe we made it. I didn't think we'd survive this." Marcus glanced at him, his face tired but resolute. "We did. You did." The police officers who had arrived on the scene slowly approached, weapons holstered but alert. Detective Harper was among them, his expression calm, but focused as he took in the scene. "Is everyone okay?" Harper asked, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of further danger. Marcus nodded, wiping the blood from his brow. "We're all right, but they're still out there. The bikers will be back." Harper raised an eyebrow. "Don't worry. We've got backup coming. We've been monitoring the Razorbacks for weeks. This is the break we needed." Tyrell stood beside Marcus, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I didn't know who I could trust anymore. But you stood by me when no one else would." Marcus's expression softened. "You don't have to thank me, Tyrell. I told you, I've got your back." That's what friends do. The police began questioning the few remaining bikers who hadn't managed to escape, gathering evidence from the wreckage. But Marcus knew the real work was just beginning. There were still a lot of questions to answer, and the bikers wouldn't be easily defeated. They were part of something much bigger than just a few troublemakers. As the night wore on, the adrenaline of the fight began to wear off, and Marcus felt the weight of exhaustion settle over him. He had been through a lot in the past few hours, physically, mentally, and emotionally. But he wasn't finished yet. Tyrell leaned against the bar, looking out at the street where the chaos had unfolded. "Do you think this is really over?" he asked quietly. "Do you think we can really put this behind us?" Marcus sighed, looking up at the sky. The stars were barely visible through the city lights, but there was a sense of peace now that the danger had passed, for the moment, at least. "I don't know," Marcus replied honestly. "But what I do know is that we're not giving up. Not now, not ever." Tyrell smiled, though it was faint. "Yeah, we've got a chance now. Thanks to you." Just then, a loud horn blared from outside. Marcus turned to see a long line of motorcycles pulling up to the bar. His heart skipped a beat as he realized what was happening. For a moment, his breath caught in his throat, and his first instinct was to prepare for another confrontation. But then he saw the riders weren't the same bikers from the Razorbacks. These were different men, their faces covered with smiles, not anger. They were dressed in leather jackets, but they didn't have the same menacing presence. At the front of the line was a huge black man, tall and muscular, with a kind expression. He dismounted his motorcycle and walked toward Marcus and Tyrell, his steps confident yet measured. "I don't know if you remember me," the man said, his deep voice resonating through the night air. "But I'm Malik. We've got a club of our own, the Black Lions, and we heard what happened here tonight. We just wanted to make sure you knew we've got your back." Marcus blinked in confusion. "Wait, you know about the bikers?" Malik nodded. "We've been keeping an eye on them, and we don't take kindly to people like them hurting our community. We're here to make sure they never bother you again." Tyrell looked at Marcus, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Are they offering help?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Looks like it." Malik turned to the officers and waved. "We've got your backs too. If you need any assistance with the Razorbacks, we're happy to help out." The officers exchanged surprised glances, but nodded in agreement. The presence of the Black Lions was a strong ally to have. They were known for their loyalty to each other and their communities, and their involvement would make a huge difference in the fight against the Razorbacks. As the group of bikers unloaded supplies from their trucks and motorcycles, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. It seemed like, for once, the odds were in their favor. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange. The bar was still standing, and the fight for respect was far from over. But in that moment, it felt like a new chapter had begun. A chapter where Marcus and Tyrell were no longer alone, where they had allies willing to stand beside them. "We'll handle things from here," Malik said as he clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "You've done more than enough tonight." Marcus smiled, feeling the weight of the night finally lifting. "Thanks, Malik. I didn't expect this." Tyrell stepped up beside him, shaking Malik's hand. "Thanks, I owe you guys." Malik gave a sly grin. "No one owes anyone anything. This is just what brothers do. We protect each other." As the Black Lions settled in, ready to support Marcus and Tyrell, the morning sun began to warm the streets. The sounds of motorcycles revving in the distance no longer held the same threat. For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt hopeful. He turned to Tyrell, who was looking at him with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "Let's rebuild this bar," Marcus said. "We've got work to do." And as they stood together, the future seemed a little brighter, the road ahead a little less uncertain. For Marcus and Tyrell, the fight wasn't over, but now they had something they hadn't had before, a real family.